Engage. Sprints. Big clump. Drop your E's, boys. Drop your E's. Fucking beautiful.
Okay, hello again guys and girls. Let's have a look at the blazing staff. So this is what I would class as probably the biggest DPS PvE weapon. So it's a fire staff. This build is a very artifact heavy build. It's also not a cheap build, but one of these in your group is going to increase your dungeon running time by so much. I can't stress enough how good this really is. So again, I'm just going to go through the build first of all. So beginning with Royal Cowl. So we're on Perpetual Energy. Master the forbidden secret of unlimited energy. Who doesn't want to do that? Briefly, at least. This spell will reduce your energy cost for all spells to 0 for 15 seconds. So it's a really, really important ability. Fire is very, very mana hungry. And I mean, like it just sucks your mana away like nothing. So this is going to be really important for that energy management when you're hitting those, spamming out those Qs, which I'll explain a little later on. It's going to stop you from draining your whole mana pool away. For the passive, we're just going to run Aggression. Increases your damage and heal power by 3.5%. So this build focuses on as much damage as possible. So really, this is the only one to go for. Moving down, chest piece, Druid Robe. So on the Druid Robe, we've got Obsessive Burst. And this increases your damage and heal power by 7% for 10 seconds. During this time, each time you activate an ability, this effect is multiplied, stacks up to 8 times. So basically every time you cast a spell, use any ability at all, it adds another 7% damage over this duration of the 10 seconds. So you can really stack this up, which I'll demonstrate in a little bit. Once you get this up to max bonus, your damage is really big. Can't stress enough how strong this robe is. Again, your passive, Aggression again, increase your damage and heal power by 8%, really important. On the boots, we've got Assassin Shoes, which is a leather boot. Now we're using this for the refreshing sprint. All leather boots have this ability, so you don't necessarily have to run the Assassin Shoes. Personally, I like the Assassin Shoes. For certain boss fights, you can swap over to the dodge roll, which is a short duration roll. Good for rolling out of special abilities, gives a little invulnerability bubble at the same time. I'll just demonstrate that on. So there's your dodge roll. Very brief invulnerability bubble, but it's good for certain bosses anyway. But the majority of the time, you're going to be running this refreshing sprint. So when you use refreshing sprint, it makes you recover your cooldowns quicker. And that's going to come in really important, particularly on the E ability for the Blazing Staff. So you can see even with an omelet running, I'm still looking at a 38-second cooldown. What's the standard cooldown? It doesn't tell me because I got the omelet running. I think it's about 45 seconds or so. So it's a pretty long cooldown. Passive on the boots. So for this one, I run Quick Thinker. Reduces cooldown times by 2.5%. I only do that because the damage boost on the boots is only 1.5%, and I think having a little bit of cooldown reduction is more beneficial. Really, it's not that important. You can run whichever one you want. Don't run attack speed. Totally useless for a staff, but either Balanced Mind or Quick Thinker. One of those two. On to the staff itself. So the Blazing Staff has 2 Qs. There's Firebolt. Firebolt dealing 330 magical damage to an enemy and igniting them to take 22 damage per second for 4 seconds. The burning stacks up to 5 times, so it's a strong single target nuke. It does also have Burning Field, which is a little AoE burn that you can throw on the ground. Again, it's a really good spell. There's a lot of situations where the AoE Q is very good, but for the Blazing Staff, the single target Q is the one you want. Now that comes in most important when we were mentioning earlier on the Druid Robe, trying to stack up that obsessive burst within the 10 seconds. So you're going to do that by spamming your Q as much as possible and popping a few other abilities at the same time. So always the single target Q. Now there's a choice of Ws on the Blazing Staff. Now I'm running Fire Wave. So thinking about group fighting, so Fire Wave has a little knockback. It also does Ignite stack, doing 131 damage a second. Now the knockback is essentially an interrupt. So if your tank doesn't have much in the way of interrupt, or if he's just struggling to keep everything interrupted, you can help him out here with the extra interrupt from the Fire Wave. It's down to the tank's preference whether he wants you to do that or not. You know, some tanks like to run damage mitigation where they don't interrupt special abilities, they just dodge them to minimize incoming DPS. Speak to your tank first, ask him which one he wants you to run. If he doesn't want you to run the Fire Wave, really all the other Ws on the fire are pretty good. I really like Fireball, 471 damage to any enemies in a 5-meter radius, also leaves a little burn. Got Fire Artillery, which is the new W. I'm not going to go into it because I really haven't had any chance to test it out. I did try it briefly, didn't seem very good to me, but I could be totally wrong, so we'll revisit that one a little bit later. It's only been patched in a day ago. Firewall, again on the W. Now, PvE wise, Firewall not so useful. Where it would come in very useful is if you got dived, and you can use that Firewall to wall people away from the back of your group. Really nice PvP ability. But for the moment, we're just going to focus on Fire Wave as part of the build. Here's the big damage on the Blazing. Flame Tornado. So creates a Flame Tornado rampaging over the ground for 5 seconds. Every enemy within 5 meters of its center will take high magic damage. After leaving the area, the burn damage will continue for 3 more ticks. So against creatures, you're looking at 164 magical damage every half a second. So you can see how that stacks up really quickly. Passive, Aggressive Caster. So every 4 activated spells, you gain a cast speed buff of 40%. This is really important with the single target Q. So you trigger that Aggressive Caster, and that's going to again really help you to stack up the Obsessive Burst on your robe. Accessories, Limehurst Cape. Gotta have a Limehurst Cape. With the fire, even though you're using the Royal Cowl, you still need the Limehurst Cape. You'll not be able to keep your mana up without it. Always Omelette. So improves your cast speed and cooldown reduction by 13.5%. So it's improving your cooldowns, getting you that tornado back a little bit quicker, and giving it 13.5% extra cast speed, which again, is helping you stack up that Obsessive Burst there on the robe. So without attacking anything, just on the spot here, I'm going to do a little tutorial of the order in which I would use skills. So I'm going to do it with my mouse, so you can see which ones that I'm pushing rather than with my keyboard. So you've got your Obsessive Burst. When you go in, it's always the first ability you're going to use, because even activating your Perpetual Energy, activating a Sprint, any of these count as an ability and add an extra 7% damage on your stacks. So use your Obsessive Burst, then pop your Perpetual Energy. You can use a Sprint even though you're not moving, gives you an extra stack, and then that's when you'd start spamming your Q ability. And the idea is to build this up here, up to 8 stacks. Once you hit 8 stacks, you then drop that Flame Tornado, which is already huge damage, but because of all the damage bonuses on top, it's out of this world. So, gonna do a little test here. This is actually a group dungeon, so doing this solo is probably not the best idea, but the problem with the fire, it does so much damage in the solo dungeons, you just nuke everything down before you've got a chance to get anything done. So we'll give this a go, see how we go. So there we go, we're at 8 stacks. So you're grouping them all up, dropping your flame tornado. You can see that damage. I mean, it's... Bear in mind, this isn't a solo dungeon, this is a group dungeon. It's only a T4 group dungeon, but the damage is... it's nuts. It makes it look like a solo. So I'll do this once more. I'll group these 4 mobs up. Once I got my cooldowns back, I'm just going to use that sprint. You see it gets the... shorten my cooldown to 21 seconds instead of 38 seconds. Okay, so I'm just grouping them up. Your tank could do all this grouping up for you, you wouldn't do it yourself. So activating my obsessive burst. Just gonna stack up. So there's the 8 stacks. Dropping the blazing tornado. You see that damage. Again, like I say, this is a group dungeon, so we're doing really big damage here. It's a T4 group dungeon, but so it's a simple concept. Once you get used to it, it's all about the order in which you use the spells. So you're always popping, every time you go in, it's Obsessive Burst first, then Perpetual Energy to save your mana. You'll see I'm full mana, I've got no mana issues right now. Drop the Obsessive Burst, you use the Perpetual Energy, then you spam those Qs. You're watching up here in the top left corner. Once that Obsessive Burst hits 8 stacks, straight on with a tornado, you drop the tornado down. One thing to bear in mind, this build does so much damage that you can pull aggro off the tank. So if you're fighting really tough mobs, sometimes it's better to give the tank an extra few seconds just to grab a little more threat. If the mobs aren't quite so tough, and you just drop your tornado and they're all gonna die anyway.
Engage. Sprints. Big clump. Drop your E's, boys. Drop your E's. Fucking